Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the press conference held by the Weston A. Price Foundation. We are glad to see you here and particularly welcome journalists and members of the press. The Weston A. Price Foundation is a nonprofit nutrition education foundation dedicated to providing accurate information about nutrition. We have no ties with government or industry, and we pride ourselves on showing the scientific validation of traditional foodways. This press conference is organized to express our grave concerns about the USDA Dietary Guidelines for 2010, especially as they will be imposed on institutions, particularly schools, and also to introduce our own dietary guidelines based on 4 food groups called Healthy for Life. This is a colorful, easy-to-understand booklet containing information, guidelines, and recipes. So we have some major concerns about the 2010 guidelines. First and foremost, the continued restriction of saturated fat, which has been reduced now from 10% of calories to 7% of calories. The continued restriction of cholesterol to less than 300 milligrams per day. That's less than the amount in 2 eggs. The restriction of sodium to 1,500 milligrams, which is about 2/3 of a teaspoon of salt per day. Promotion of low-fat milk and lean milk. The use of meat substitutes in school lunches. And whereas there are restrictions on saturated fats and cholesterol, there is no restriction on refined carbohydrates or sweeteners in school meals. And I think what we need to understand most importantly is that the main group of people who are going to be affected by these guidelines are school children. Because unless the schools serve meals that follow these guidelines, they do not get federal funding. As early as 1937, researchers showed that dietary cholesterol has no influence on blood cholesterol. If we restrict dietary cholesterol, our bodies just make more cholesterol. And the tragedy of cholesterol restriction in children is that children cannot make adequate cholesterol for the optimal development of their brain and nervous system. Even the most ardent proponent of the cholesterol theory, Ansel Keys, said that cholesterol in the food has no effect on cholesterol levels on the blood. So there is no need to have any strictures on cholesterol consumption in the diet. And the downside of cholesterol restriction is that cholesterol-rich foods like eggs, organ meats, fats, butter, seafood supply critical nutrients in the diet, particularly vitamins A, D, E, and K, choline, arachidonic acid. All of these are vital for many functions, but particularly for the brain and the neurological system. Cholesterol is the mother of all hormones. All of the sex hormones are made out of cholesterol, and all of the hormones that regulate mineral metabolism, glucose levels, blood pressure, and healing and help us deal with stress, they're all made out of cholesterol. So especially when you're restricting cholesterol for growing children, this can have very serious consequences. Vitamin A is needed to make all of these hormones, and vitamin A is found only in cholesterol-rich foods like animal fats and organ meats. Key nutrients for brain development are all cholesterol-rich foods such as eggs, butter, fatty fish, organ meats, bacon, and so forth. And when we restrict cholesterol-rich foods, we are taking away from our population, particularly growing children, the very foods that they need for optimal development of the brain. There's a very good explanation for why our SAT scores are falling, and that's because of the dietary changes over the last 30 years. When we listened in on the webinars of the Dietary Guidelines Committee, they often referred to nutrient-dense foods, and for them, nutrient-dense foods were fruits and vegetables. Now, we're not against fruits and vegetables, but we should not be calling these foods nutrient dense. They are lovely foods to have in our diet, but compared to meat and organ meats such as liver, they are very poor in the key nutrients that we need for growth and health. The saturated fats have been demonized in this country for 60 or 70 years. They have been accused of everything from clogging arteries to causing diabetes, causing multiple sclerosis, and none of these accusations is true. None of them is based on any kind of sound science. Saturated fats play many critical roles in the body. They are important for our cell membranes to work properly. They are important for putting calcium in the bones. The heart actually needs saturated fats to function properly. They protect the liver. The lungs cannot function without saturated fats, and when you have a diet in which saturated fats are lacking, you find a lot of proneness to lung disease such as asthma or even lung cancer. The kidneys, the immune system, again, are dependent on having saturated fats. The essential fatty acids work synergistically with saturated fats, and saturated fats support the detoxification processes in the body. The justification for restricting fat in school lunches is that fat is going to make children fat. A very interesting study out of Sweden found that children put on low-fat diets ended up fatter than children on normal diets, and they ended up having greater insulin resistance and eating more sugar. Another study from this country found that women who consumed low-fat dairy products had much more trouble getting pregnant. So whole-fat dairy products support fertility. And in women, consumption of whole-fat dairy products was associated with lower levels of weight gain than those who are trying to restrict their fat consumption. The famous Framingham heart study was used to promote margarine and other foods that did not contain saturated fat, but in fact, this study found that those who ate the most saturated fat, the most cholesterol, and even the most calories weighed the least, had lower levels of serum cholesterol, and were more physically active. So the three biggest risk factors for heart disease, or what we consider risk factors, were lower in people consuming more saturated fat.